Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really incredible topic, rebuilding with vision. We're basically going to extract some timeless, highly actionable modern leadership mechanics from a 2,500-year-old biblical story. And honestly, whether you're spearheading a massive corporate turnaround, maybe leading a remote team through some crazy disruption, or just managing a local community initiative, the framework we're about to unpack is going to completely change how you view your responsibilities. It's a total game changer for leading people through chaos. So we're drawing our insights today directly from the Nehemiah Leadership Series, Volume 1. It's this powerful 30-day devotional by Reverend Felix Tete Aita. And it centers on this absolutely astonishing historical event known as the 52-day miracle. To put this into perspective for you, without any heavy machinery, no modern supply chain logistics, and literally no standing army, a guy named Nehemiah led a highly fractured, demoralized group of people to rebuild the ruined, miles-long defensive walls of Jerusalem. And he did it in exactly 52 days. No way, right? It is an absolute masterclass in vision casting, strategic planning, and servant leadership that is incredibly relevant to today's high-stakes environments. But before we look at how he actually pulled this off, we kind of need to establish what leadership even is. The author hits the nail on the head with this definition. A leader is someone who looks at yesterday's challenges and tomorrow's prospects, and then takes the necessary steps today to influence tomorrow positively. See, Nehemiah didn't just ignore the past. He looked totally objectively at his people's historical failures, envisioned a fully restored, secure Jerusalem, and then bridged that massive gap through immediate action. That convergence, memory, vision, and present action is the absolute core of transformative leadership. To really apply this today, we're going to walk through a 6-part leadership blueprint straight from the source text. We'll cover the call to rebuild, casting a God-centered vision, strategic planning and cooperation, resilience against opposition, the servant leader's character, and finally, leaving a faithful legacy. All right, let's jump right into phase 1, the call to rebuild, which is really the catalyst for action. What's wild is that Nehemiah's leadership journey didn't kick off in a boardroom, and he didn't just get handed a fancy new executive title. He was a cupbearer in a palace in Susa, essentially a high-level servant. The whole thing started simply because he asked an honest question about a broken situation back in his homeland. The author uses this really brilliant C mnemonic to trace how his vision was born. It starts with concern. He actually cared enough to ask about his people. That concern quickly led to grief. He sat down and wept over the broken walls, really letting the weight of the ruins sink in. But he didn't just stay stuck in despair. That grief turned into a cry, a structured, desperate prayer for guidance. And finally, confession. He didn't point fingers at past generations. He owned it. He confessed the failures of his people and himself. In modern terms, that's extreme ownership. A true leader audits their own failures before they ever dream of pointing a finger at someone else. Which brings us to phase 2, casting a God-centered vision, taking it from a private burden to a public mission. Because look, you can't just stay on your knees forever. A leader has to take that private burden and turn it into a courageous public mission. And the author continues the C mnemonic here. First, courage. Nehemiah literally risked his life making a bold request to the king of Persia to let him go rebuild. Next, he recognized his commission, knowing that the resources and safe passage he got were ultimately favor from God, not just his own clever negotiating skills. But notice this third point, caution. Before he went out and announced some massive restructuring to the public, he actually went out secretly by night to inspect the ruined walls. He gathered the data. He needed to know exactly how bad the damage was. Only then did he move to the final step, which was issuing a challenge to the people. And when he finally spoke to the city's inhabitants, his message was so powerful. He gave them a brutally honest diagnosis. He didn't sugarcoat the fact that their city was defenseless and totally ruined. But he paired that hard truth with a highly hopeful, organized call to action. Because he was so honest, empathetic, and prepared with actual resources, the broken people enthusiastically accepted the mission. Their response was literally, let's rise up and build. This is the very essence of vision casting. People will absolutely follow you into the fire if you are transparent about the heat, but exceptionally clear about the destination. Moving right along to phase 3, strategic planning and cooperation, organizing the work. Having an inspiring vision is fantastic, but true leadership requires strategic planning. I mean, eventually, someone has to actually organize the resources and lay the bricks. The author anchors this principle with Ecclesiastes 4:9, 2 are better than 1. Nehemiah didn't try to play the hero and build the whole wall himself. Instead, he organized families, priests, local merchants, and assigned them specific sections. But here is the genius part. He often assigned them to repair the section of the wall right outside their own homes. Talk about the ultimate alignment of incentives. By doing this, he built this incredible sense of personal ownership and quality control. You're certainly not going to do a sloppy job building the wall that directly protects your own family, right? Everyone had a vital part to play. So let me ask you straight up, using a prompt directly from the author. Who can you involve in your leadership mission today? Are you out there trying to carry the entire weight of your organization or your family or a major project all by yourself? Real leaders empower their team. They delegate effectively. They absolutely do not hoard the work just because they have a misplaced need for control. Okay, phase 4, resilience against bitter opposition, standing firm. Now, as soon as you start making visible progress and disrupting the status quo, you are going to face pushback. It's inevitable. Nehemiah's rapid progress immediately provoked intense mockery, anger, and eventually violent threats from external enemies, like this regional leader named Sanballat, who really wanted Jerusalem to stay weak. This poses a huge question for all of us. How do you respond when you are criticized or opposed? When the mockery turns into real threats, whether that's corporate sabotage, aggressive market opposition, or just internal team fatigue? Do you panic? Do you abandon the project? Or do you figure out a way to stand firm? Nehemiah resolved this crisis with this brilliant dual strategy that's often called the sword and trowel method. The workers literally held a building tool in one hand to keep constructing and a weapon in the other hand to defend themselves. They didn't let the threat stop their progress, but they also weren't foolish enough to ignore the very real danger. In today's business terms, this is basically the equivalent of maintaining your daily operations and driving growth, while simultaneously fighting off aggressive market disruption or tightening budgets. You literally have to be able to build and defend at the exact same time. That brings us to phase 5, the servant leader's character, maintaining integrity under pressure. Because external threats like Sanballat aren't the only test you'll face as a leader. We have to look at internal integrity too. A leader's character is ultimately tested by how they handle power, privilege, and the vulnerable people within their own ranks. So while the wall was going up, a severe economic crisis hit, and Nehemiah found out the wealthy nobles were actively exploiting the working class with extortionate interest rates. He shut it down immediately and demanded full restitution. Furthermore, for his entire 12 years as governor, Nehemiah refused to take his state-sponsored food allowances and taxes. He knew the people were already burdened enough. Compare that to the past governors who demanded lavish privileges and exploited people. Nehemiah proved that servant leadership isn't about the perks you can extract. It's all about the sacrifices you are willing to make for the health of your organization. And finally, phase 6, leaving a faithful legacy, finishing the work. This is the last phase of our blueprint. The vision started in sorrow back in Susa, and by day 52, against literally all logistical odds, the massive defensive wall was finished. But here's the thing, the true work of a leader doesn't stop at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The timeline shows Nehemiah was still deeply engaged in ongoing governance 12 years later. He didn't just build a wall and walk away to, go write a memoir. He guarded the gates, appointed faithful custodians, organized public readings of the law, and actively corrected cultural compromises for over a decade. His true legacy wasn't just the stone structure, it was his sustained day-after-day faithfulness to the people and the culture he helped build. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering thought. How do you want your leadership story to end? Nehemiah's story didn't conclude with a grand victory parade or a demand for a statue. It ended with a simple, humble prayer to God. Remember me, my God, for good. He wasn't building a monument to his own ego. He was building a lasting, faithful legacy. As you look at your own leadership journey today, whether it's your business, your family, your community, ask yourself, are you just managing the day-to-day, or are you building something that will truly last? Thanks so much for joining me as we explored this incredible blueprint, and I really hope it inspires you to rise up and build whatever mission is in front of you today.